This week's show is supported by Granola, the AI note-taker made for professionals in back-to-back meetings, online or in person. As an advisor, consultant, or manager, Granola gives you complete flexibility in how you inform participants and handle consent. No bot joining the call, just quiet, unobtrusive capture running on your device. It works across everything: Zoom, Google Meet, Teams, and on your phone for in-person sessions too. The real superpower? Querying everything across every call you've ever recorded, or drilling down into a single project history in seconds. Set up your own custom reports, spot patterns, and connect to all your favorite tools: Notion, HubSpot, Zapier, and more. It's not just a note-taker, it's a second brain for your business or your practice. Thanks to the nice people at Granola. Use the link at go.granola.ai/Michelle, and they'll extend your 1-week trial to a full month. The link's in the show notes, or visit go.granola.ai/Michelle.
Hi there, and welcome back to the Energy Sector Heroes podcast. My name is Michelle Fraser, and every week I will speak with incredible people who share their lessons, experiences, and stories from their time spent in the energy sector. Hi there, and welcome back again to this week's episode. If you're new to the show, then please take a second to subscribe and even consider sharing the show with just one other person. This week I am joined by Philip Lewis. Philip has over 30 years of corporate, commercial management and strategic planning experience. Philip, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, well, I think you've given a bit of a good introduction there. My name's Philip Lewis. I've been in industry for well over 30 years now. In one sense, a jack of all trades, master of none, but a career that's come through the commercial, marketing and business development leg into general management board positions, and of late being a partner in consultancy in the offshore and marine space.
So how did you get started off in the energy sector?
Well, I guess it's just flowed from the jobs I've been involved in. I started off in what was at the time Trafalgar House Construction, which became the, Caverna Construction and part of the Caverna Group. So that was civil and structural engineering, so more onshore civils, onshore structurals, roads, bridges, structural steel. But from that, I got into one of the businesses, which was a structural fab for onshore, and was involved in growing business in Middle East, Malaysia, Indonesia, in basically onshore oil and gas projects. So refineries, LNG plants, those type of things, but more the stick-built structural side. But then when I switched over to a company called IMC Pan Asia into the unitized shipyard, from there, we formed a joint venture with Chevron in the Gulf of Thailand. We were a large shipyard. They had a large requirement for volumetric production of unmanned wellhead platforms for the Gulf of Thailand. We formed an alliance structure with them. I was involved initially from the shipyard side, but then over time became a director in the business. And that turned out to grow up to 15 to 20 platforms a year, growing volume in that offshore game. So with that Chevron relationship, obviously began to learn a lot more about the offshore side than the onshore side. I then, within my role in that business, I ran one of the an offshore service vessel business in Thailand, serving Chevron, but also PTTEP and other owners. That was a joint venture company. I eventually moved over to the joint venture partner to run their wider ASEAN Asia business. And that included setting up businesses in Brunei, joint ventures for Brunei Shell, picking up business or growing the business in Malaysia and through that Asia region. And that really, obviously, you're dealing a lot more with oil and gas majors, getting involved in their oil and gas programs. Because we played the local content card, I was on the local content side. Usually, or with our partnerships, we were on the local content side. We were often getting involved in the bigger oil company programs, vendor programs that they would usually have for their major vendors. And because of that, you get more access to the oil and gas companies, get involved in their programs, learning in their programs, and getting more opportunities to get more business in that field. So I sort of came in through the back door, not really an offshore, not an offshore engineer.
So I was just wondering, how did you manage to make the transition to management? I mean, what steps did you take to prepare yourself to get that promotion?
Well, I mean, initially I had the academic foundation, I suppose, in that I had a business administration background, graduating both from a UK and a French business school. So I had those the fundamental academic principles to support it, and then it was, I guess, through time being involved in see the management, senior leadership teams, basically through successive position of leading the commercial, leading the marketing side, being on the leadership team, getting involved in the management reviews, management meetings, understanding those challenges, and opportunities arise. And if we're honest, I think luck is of something to do with it, being in the right place at the right time. Others can be in the wrong place at the wrong time, but you have to make that luck, and you have to make that luck through your performance, through understanding. But I would say you're not always perfectly shaped for that management role when you're put in that management role. You might have quite a lot of the skills, but you may not have always all of those skills. And it's learning how to have the right networks of people, sponsors, mentors, people that you mentor and develop, your teams that help support your success, that are very important as well.
Okay, do you really think it is important to be? I mean, it is the oldest saying, being in the right place at the right time. Do you think that that's really true?
I think there is some element of that. Through over a career, I've seen exceptional people not necessarily excel as much as they should. Some of that could be personality driven or just some issue that means that they're not selected. And I've seen people who are clearly not shouldn't be in their leadership positions being in leadership positions. I do believe there is a truism that life is not always fair. You make your luck. I mean, you have to make your luck. I mean, you can't just stand there and somebody goes, "Hey, here, have a senior leadership role." You have to put in the hard yards. You have to make errors, make mistakes, learn from them, grow, build your networks, work with teams, invest in people. It's not always seemingly obvious that you invest in somebody younger, there's a benefit for that. Whereas I've always felt throughout my career, investing with people who are younger and enthusiastic and whatever. Sometimes they'll still work in my team. Sometimes they won't, but they'll still be business contacts in the future. That some will go on to bigger and better things. But there's always a benefit to that. But there's some of that's more attitude driven, I think. So the luck thing is, or being in the right place at the right time. I think there's an element of that, but I mean, there are things behind creating the conditions where where everything falls into place. I would say that the quite often just being the right person for the right job is not always good enough.
Okay, in your opinion, what makes a good manager?
I think there are quite a lot of things. I think there's certainly being sure in yourself, confident to make decisions, because you have to make decisions. Ultimately, as a manager, as a leader, you have to make decisions. Some of those difficult decisions, so you have to have fundamental skills background to be able to make those decisions, but you also have to be able to listen to others, quickly understand what people are saying, summarize if their opinions are opinions that count in your decision making process. I think as a good manager, you'll have fostered that conditions where you have that network of people who are confident to speak to you, but within the hierarchy structure, but also confident enough not necessarily to hide bad news, good news, differing opinions. But you ultimately are the person who makes the decision. You're not putting that decision on somebody else. You've got to make that decision and get it done in a timely manner. If that goes against what say your team as a consensus maybe believe. You have to explain why that's the decision you made, get them on board because you need that team behind you and with you to deliver and execute on that decision. So that means being able to communicate as well. Sometimes be hard and lay down the law, but also do that in a situation where you've created the relationships where people understand that you are the leader and your decision is the final decision and you are accountable for that decision.
Okay. How do you handle making difficult decisions?
I think I've been lucky enough through my career that I've had teams and sponsors, sort of trusted lieutenants or people above me, a sponsor that I can go and have conversations with, seek advice or use as a sounding board where there are decisions, if I have conflict in that decision and just want to test something and get some feedback, people I trust, people I've built relationships up with, take that on board. Often this has to be done in quite a timely, quick manner. So being able to access those people quickly, being able to lay out a problem quickly and what the specific problem is that you're asking for advice with to enable you to make that decision. So being clear in your thought. So not just phone up somebody for a chat, but this is my problem. This is the advice I need from you. Sorry, we'll catch up later. I don't have time, but give me your thoughts on this. How would you deal with it? Take that on board and have that as part of your decision process. I mean, I wouldn't say that's every single decision, obviously, but that's for some of the more complex decisions or difficult decisions where sometimes you may have a bit of doubt or maybe you have a question and you just want to check that out. And having those good sounding boards is important.
Is it important to have mentors throughout your career then, or advisors, especially when you're in senior management?
I believe so. Yeah, and those mentors could be somebody on a board, could be a management level above you. They could even be external coaches. I mean, in my particular business line now, which is more, we're in the consulting side of the business. Quite a bit of what we do is sit down with management teams and effectively, I wouldn't say mentoring, but offering the advice and offering the lessons learned. Then people benefit from that. So yes, I do believe having mentors, having support structures is important, but ultimately you are the responsible, accountable person and you have to be confident in your decision making at the end of the day. And you have to make a decision. Not making a decision is often can harm a business.
Yeah, I fully appreciate that. You have to make a decision, but sometimes it can be really hard to. How do you go about making decisions? Do you collect a lot of data? Do you talk to a lot of different people? Do you get your whole team, try to get your whole team on board?
Oh yes, no. I mean, I do believe in data. I do believe in the source data. I believe that your team should be part of that. That fundamental, or you should have the systems, processes, and team members in place that can deliver you data. And if you don't have the data to make the decisions, it's okay. We need to go and collect that data and understand that situation. Those decisions aren't just sort of gut feelings. I do believe in data and having the right data to make that decision. One of the problems I found over the time in organizations, you can often have too much data for data's sake. And there's often a fine line between having enough good data and having too much data. Being able to organize that data and have that data in the format you need clearly to make those decisions is important. I found being able to get data and simplify it through good business planning is a very useful tool to help to align your teams to what you're trying to do, motivate them as well. So things like bonus structures as well, but it helps guide their decision making if they have a good roadmap, and that roadmap is often based on good data of where to go, so they're already aligned. So by the time you're having to make decisions, a lot of that data is already in the system. But there are still some of those times then when having those conversations outside of just the pure data is important.
Yeah, I agree actually. What has been one of your major highlights of your career so far?
I mean, it's not probably the biggest in terms of financial performance of a business unit or something like that. But it's been more I've probably got equal pegging. It's the joint ventures I've been involved in as a leader. One, I set up a whole new business in one Southeast Asian country, Brunei, from zero to a sizable local business manned by local managers and technicians, and with a good local business partner, getting rewarded by our client for performance in a very short time and profitable very time. And as a delivery exercise, as a team building exercise, as a, putting together a team, getting them all aligned to an objective and delivering on that objective, that was, I got a lot of satisfaction from that. An equal one in a Thai JV I had, where I was a general manager of that business, bringing in a business planning structure into the business that was enabled me to communicate with two shareholders, and it was a 50-50 shareholding, so it was quite difficult to manage those shareholders, but bring in a business planning structure that could align with them to align what they wanted in the business, that allowed me then to communicate simply with the teams below to get them all on board and aligned with what was going on, and then create a reward structure around that business plan structure that allowed me to reward success because we were successful, and allowed me to reward those teams in a fair way, that in a way they'd never been rewarded before. That led to increased loyalty, increased retention, increased performance. So it was a virtuous cycle of performance, and that sort of proved the good planning and the good communication and the alignment, works. And there was a lot of satisfaction in that. Wasn't a particularly big business, but it took the business bigger, and it was certainly a very satisfactory outcome.
I mean, that's an amazing achievement because starting anything from zero is really hard. What would be your steps on how you would do that?
Well, often because I spent a lot of my career in Southeast Asia and Asia Pac region, in the maritime and offshore business, offshore local content is very important. So having your local business partners is a very important step in the business because of the local content requirements for ownership of the business. So you have to recognize that's a success criteria. Selecting your partner is very difficult. For that, I, would have worked with I had a particularly good group CEO who had historical relationships that I was able to go and consult on, rely on, and use for introductions to be able to finalize our partnerships, create the legal structures with my corporate teams to have those joint venture agreements to then get on to focus the business. But then from there, you rely on your local partner's knowledge for some of the business, but you have to support it with resource from the home office to make things a success. Get people who may not be trained in your systems into your systems, invest in them, get them trained up in the home office, agree with them what their outcomes are and what you're expecting from that, and then work with them to help them achieve that. So I had to spend a lot of time in country working with them, let the leaders lead, but still be that our clients would often expect the foreign joint venture partner to be present. So you had to be present, but you didn't have to step on the toes of the local management team. Let the management support them from behind, but then be visible to the client as a foreign partner. So you would often play the role more as a marketing manager than a business leader to the client, to be that sort of point of interface. So you had to learn where were the important touch points. There were certain points where you as the leader actually shouldn't have been there, because you had to let the locals run the business. They were the managers in place, but also there were cultural issues and local issues where it just made it important to step back. It was all about the outcome. And I think learning that is because I'd been overseas working, starting from marketing manager, commercial manager positions. So I'd been in not necessarily a senior leadership position originally, but, learning through the sort of hard knocks and building up the experience as well.
Okay, it sounds amazing. I was going to ask you, building something from scratch is an amazing achievement, no matter what it is. But how do you know when when your time is to take a step back?
Oh, that's quite a hard question to answer. Some of it just happens in that when you're confident enough in your leadership team that they're doing what needs to be done, you don't have to be, for instance, on the ground as much or hands-on as much. Through your review processes, you begin to say, okay, we're rather than me reviewing in country, we'll do a telephone review, we'll go over, and I'll come in every 3 months instead of every 2 weeks or one week. So over time, you just begin to let go. You also have often from your group leadership, they'll probably come down and give you other priorities to focus on as well. So you have to allocate your time to other things as well. So some of them is in one way you're sort of forced by circumstance to be hands off, but on the other side, if your metrics are being met and you've got trust and confidence in the team, and by having the processes in place. I mean, for instance, you'll have a management meeting process looking through the financials. You'll have a safety review. You'll have maybe internal audit once every, well, initially maybe 6 months, 1 year, and then 2 years, and then grow that audit schedule. But have various checkpoints in there to make sure that your feelings are right and that everything's going right. Because again, you're trusting people and mostly it goes right, but sometimes it goes wrong. And sometimes you do have bad actors and you need that found out. But you're not all going to do that yourself. Your systems and processes are hopefully in place that allow you to review, verify, and validate. But you can't be hands-on all the time. That's why you have leaders underneath you. They are accountable, they are responsible. And if they are not performing, obviously you have to either coach them, help them, put correction plans in place to get them back on track, or ultimately, unfortunately, you may have to replace them.
I was going to ask you, I've got a million questions I could ask you. Actually, how would you get a project or a senior manager back on track? It's a very difficult question, I know.
It is, and I've unfortunately had to go through that a couple of times in my career. One of them is, well, I mean, initially a mixture of, let's say, formal management review. So a business unit head underneath me, you might have a monthly financial review with them. So you might tell with the financials, or with, for instance, there might be an attitude issue or something like that. You would find out from there. Often you don't. Your review meeting, you might give negative feedback on a financial performance, on something that is black and white metric. You're not doing this. Why? To give feedback that you're not happy and asking for a corrective action. But you have to be careful about going too over the top. I believe in public about really chastising somebody openly, because that can be a face issue, that can be a confidence issue, and you might just you have to offline get face to face with them. And I don't believe video calls and things like that work. I think going to them, going to their office, take them out if you have to, and having a conversation. Look, what's going on? We're not achieving at the moment. You're not achieving. Here's my feedback to you. I need to hear from you what your problems are. Have you got anything in particular that's causing a problem? You might find that somebody's got a particular personal issue that's affecting their business performance, or a life issue. So, you need to hear that out, and you need to make that decision. Is that going to be something that permanently affects the business, which you can't allow, or is that something you can help with temporarily, and that should allow them to be back on track? But ultimately, you've got to have that formal process in place as well, where if it gets to that stage where improvements are happening, you have to have a process of, look, we are formally warning you, you need to improve. Here are your improvement steps. You have to communicate that. You have to involve people like HR in that, because that's more a formal process then. So you have that formal management review and that informal discussion process, and then bring it into that And unfortunately, if you have to, if that performance doesn't improve, into that formalized review process of warnings, because there are often legal requirements to do that anyway. But I believe you should actually really input in that and just don't have that as a formal step to get rid of somebody unless you're absolutely 100% you want that person out. I found that often during those formal review processes, that has helped bring people back online.
Okay, but
Not
then
in every case, not in every case, but
okay.
they are a part of it. In most of these things, it it's not one solution is always perfect for everything. That magic formula. It's a mixture of good process, good communication, review, various steps often, I find.
So as a senior manager, you would have to be comfortable having these difficult conversations then.
But part of the job, yes. You might not like doing them, but you have to be comfortable doing them because they are an important part of delivery. But by the time they've got to the situation where you're having a formal conversation, you should have a body of evidence that says, well, we've gone through 1 quarter or 2 quarters of management reviews that have yielded no change. We've had personal conversations that have leaded low change. We've had face-to-face alignment issue sessions that have not yielded anything. By then, if you've exhausted your available tools that you have to trigger a formal process, you should be comfortable with that because you shouldn't feel that this is a personal choice or it's unfair. You should feel that you have being honest, fair, but to the business as well as to the individual. So yeah, you shouldn't feel guilty about that conversation. You shouldn't feel bad about that conversation.
Okay, I'm going to maybe ask you one final question.
That
Do you
sounds
have,
unfeeling, that though, but it's
yeah,
it's not that, but it's if you feel guilty about that, that'll eat at you.
yeah, I was going to ask you, okay, maybe ask you maybe two more questions. How do you deal with the guilt? Because I know if I was to make a difficult decision, maybe to let go of someone, it would weigh on your conscience. I think so.
I don't believe if you've really given somebody every single chance, if you've honestly given people all the training they need, all the development they need, all the support they need, if you've given them review and feedback, if you've had face-to-face conversations trying to understand what their motivation is, I find in these conversations you will get somebody sometimes who is maybe very aggressive and very defensive and won't engage in conversations. Now you can react angrily to that and say, okay, we'll go straight to review process and you're out. But you still have to take that step back and try, and it's not always hard, take your ego out of it to try and find that conversation with that person. And if you are the person that is the problem, like the individual you're talking to just doesn't trust you or doesn't like you for some reason, then you may have to bring in somebody else to have that informal conversation, formal conversation to try and find out what the root cause is, what the problem is. But ultimately, if you've exhausted all the process, if that is upsetting the balance of the team and the performance, and it is hurting other people and it is hurting you, ultimately you have to make that decision. Yes, you might feel bad about that person, and as a human, you will feel anytime anybody loses a job, you feel bad. But I also believe if you have the right processes in place to support them as well when they're leaving the company, if your organization allows it from its size and to use things like outsourcing coaches or companies, those companies that'll help you with your resumes, with your LinkedIn profiles, with your interview skills, things like that. Get people on those programs. If you can help them in exiting at some stage you will have done as much as you can because ultimately you you can't always say yes to everybody. You can't always please everybody. There will always be people, even who a part of your trusted team who you're close with that will disagree with you or not like you or not like something you've done. And you do have to accept that.
I agree, actually, you do, but it's going to be hard to do that, though.
Yeah, but life's not easy. I think a lot of it is also attitude, robustness, resilience, and I think when you've been in like us, like yourself, when you've been in the industry a long time, you've seen ups and downs. I mean, anybody who's you know in their 50s, 40s, 50s will have seen oil prices. Well, I can remember sub 10 oil prices over 100, the oil companies sacking a third of their workforce in very short periods, then coming to their suppliers and saying, well, if you don't discount 30, 40, 50% overnight, you're terminated for convenience. And having to deal with that. But then you've dealt with the boom times when the oil price has been high and everybody says, well, get me this, get me that. It doesn't matter what it costs and get the resource. So it's a roller coaster ride. And I guess over time, by the time you reach those leadership positions, you've probably been through a fair few ups and downs, a fair few challenges. Life goes on through those challenges. It sort of helps form part of your resilience foundation. And it gives you some of those lessons and it sort of tells you that, you know, have a plan. Don't just assume everything's always going to be hunky-dory, great, brilliant. You might need those exit strategies. You might need those alternative plans. You'll have to deal with things in life to come up with other solutions. I mean, won't go into too much details, but I have a very serious sort of medical condition that significantly impacted life expectancy. Now that when that happened, I decided I didn't want to be in the corporate world anymore in the sort of 9 to 5 and went into the consulting side, but I had already very well established relationships with my business partner and the core skill base, and we've been able to grow something again from nothing to quite a nice business where I'm able to work under my conditions, but doing a lot of coaching, mentoring, developing business strategy, business development in that wider sector, bringing together some of my skills. Now, when I had my diagnosis, I could have got all negative and, oh, well, woe is me. Isn't this unlucky? Isn't it terrible? What do I do? But it was rather, well, my wife will kill me if I sit around the house moping, doing nothing. So I've got to find something to do. Mentally, I want to do something to do. I have the skills, I have the capacity. So what can I do with my particular constraints? How can I deal with it? Get a plan, get it sorted, and let's go out and reach into our contacts again and let's see what we can get doing. So I never had a down day.
Okay, that's really positive. That's a really positive message as well. So, one final question, I think. Do you have any advice for any of the young graduates starting out in their career?
Well, I'm quite lucky in my position that I do have graduate interns working for me, and I would say there's a great difference in them. And it's one of my biggest joys working with them, mentoring them, the ones who want to work and do work. And I would say, there is no substitute for hard work. Nothing's free. My best interns are the ones who say, okay, well, that's what you're going to pay me for that many hours, but I want to learn more. Can you give me more? And from that, they get more coaching, more mentoring, more development, and they recognize there's a quid pro quo. So it's not just about a financial gain for a certain number of hours just to pay off some student loan or get them through. It's a genuine experience builder. And the best interns I have are the ones who recognize that, there are quid pro quos. Sometimes you have to give your time for free to actually get a good investment in your career. And my best interns are the ones who, well, I just trust implicitly now because they've gone through the doing what I've needed them to do, but going above and beyond that, being curious, asking questions, showing initiative as well. I'll ask them to do something, they'll come back and they won't be afraid to ask questions and say, well, can I do it this way? And give a suggestion. And you build confidence that way. So don't just take the hierarchy position, as in take a student internship or a job and be that student that yes sir, no sir. It's very important that you respect hierarchies, but be inquisitive, be hardworking, be open to conversations, be open to getting advice and learning, and don't just rely on AI chatbots because they get it wrong quite a lot of the time. There is no substitute for doing the hard work yourself, going to source data, source information, making your own opinion. Use chatbots where you need to help summarize and move things along, but never for the original ideas, because they really often are sourcing their opinions on what is only public, what is only high hit information on LinkedIn searches or Google searches, things like that, and often they can be very wrong. And a lot of students, I find, rely a little too heavily on it.
Okay. I think I'm going to end it there, actually. The conversation was amazing, actually. That's all the questions we have today. I would like to thank Philip for your time. That brings us to the end of another episode. Thanks for listening, and see you next week.
No, thank you, Michelle.
That brings us to the end of another episode. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, I'd like to gently encourage you to leave a 5-star rating wherever you listen to podcasts and share the show with another person. You can also follow me on LinkedIn or via my website, www.michellefraserconsultancy.com. Thanks again for listening, and see you next week.